Welcome to the HTS Hero classification of the day. My name is Brendan. Today we've got an interesting one. We'll be looking to get the HTS code for an electric violin with a headphone jack and a built-in tuner. And let's kick it off. This one should be short and sweet, but I think there'll be a couple lessons to learn around this one, which just hang tight. We'll see if it actually happens based on what gets suggested here. We've got a handful. We've got about 4 suggestions here that might be good candidates. Let's see what we've got. 9207 is musical instruments where the sound is amplified electrically, so electric instruments essentially. Other instruments, for example, guitars, violins, harps. 8518 microphone stands, no. Electric machines, okay. So it looks like these first 2 are our most reasonable, most specific anyways. And in this case, the second one is not talking about the electrification or the fact that this violin is electric. It's just talking about standard violins or stringed instruments. And so because we're at the same level here, but we're making a decision, in this case the heading level where there's 4 digits, the more specific one will generally trump a less specific one. So because we've got the added detail that this is electrically amplified, or that the instrument is or can be electrically amplified, this one will actually win 9207, which was suggested in this case. And so let's just proceed with that. Is it a keyboard or otherwise? Other in this case. On the next level, fretted stringed instruments or other. In this case, not a fretted stringed instrument. And it looks like the suggestion also lets us know that violins are not usually fretted, but they are stringed. So in this case, other. And there we go. So short and sweet for this one, 9207, 90, 80. 3 levels, pretty short and sweet, like I said. 5% import for the general rate, unless you're importing from China. In that case, there's an additional added on fee. Special rates, there are special rates in this case, which actually are free if you're importing under any of these trade agreements or from certain countries, if you so qualify. But I'm glad this one happened. So this was an interesting classification, and we'll go dig into this a little bit deeper because it'll probably be worth it for you, especially if you're into e-commerce and you're a smaller business or a smaller importer. Let's just go back to that first level. I'm curious to see, I think a lot of people, if they hadn't gotten this suggestion for 9207, they probably would have come to start searching for the code, and they would have looked for something like musical instruments in this case. So here we go. At the highest level, which is always where you'll start on your own classifications, we've got section 18, which includes musical instruments, and chapter 92, which is the chapter within that section that talks about articles of musical instruments. Pianos, other stringed musical instruments. So if you were searching for this on your own, you'd find 9202, other stringed musical instruments, and because this specifically says violins, you might be tempted, or you might be right in thinking that this would be the right one, even though it's not in this case. 9207 is the more fitting one because it's more specific, and it talks about musical instruments that are electrified, more specific, better fit. And so maybe you click on 9202, and you go, is this played with a bow? Yep, violins are played with a bow. Now, this is the most important thing. So what will happen sometimes is manufacturers will, in some cases, everyone makes mistakes, but sometimes manufacturers or suppliers will get the HTS code for you. However, if you are the importer of record, which most of the importers are, meaning the small businesses, the e-commerce people, they've got a business registered wherever, likely the United States if they're importing into the US. But in any case, there's someone responsible for the import, and that's the importer of record. They're responsible for things going well, being accurate. In this case, you might have a supplier that says, we think 920210 is the right HTS code. You only have to pay 3.2%, even if maybe you're importing from China. There's no notes here, or mention, although there's some gray area there now. However, they go, yeah, great, 3.2%. It's for musical instruments that are played with a bow. Does that sound good to you, dear importer? And you go, yeah, sounds good, 3.2%, awesome. However, in this case, it'd be wrong. You could get those violins imported, and at the port of entry, if customs so wanted to, and they opened up the crate and they said, oh, okay, electric violins, and they realized that it was classified under 9202 instead of the one that we got, which was 9207, you could run into delays, you could run into fines and penalties, on top of having to pay the difference in the rate itself, so 5% versus that 3.2%. And sometimes it can get some tricky where your supplier will try to look out for your bottom line as best they can, and they'll try to fit whatever you're importing in as affordably as they can, which sometimes means cutting corners. And so they'll try to get you that 3.2%, which another manufacturer might tell you it's more and give you a higher fee, in which case you're incentivized as a business to pick the lower fee manufacturer. And so just something to be aware of. This is a good lesson. It happens all the time. You want to make sure you do your due diligence. You want to make sure you're checking if the HTS code that is given to you is accurate, sounds good, isn't something that sort of sounds good but isn't as accurate as it should be, because it could end up having issues at customs. And so in this case, not 9210 for today. Although it's close. If it wasn't an electric violin, you'd be spot on in this case. But because it's an electric violin, you have 9207, 9080 instead, 5%. So there you have it, classification of the day. If you're looking for HTS codes, or you want that extra sanity check that the code that you might have been given by a forwarder or a supplier makes sense and is the right code, check out HTS Hero. We help you find your code pretty quickly. And have a great day, y'all. Take care.